is Cameron Davis. Call me Cam. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and on behalf of the Administrator of the U.S. EPA, Gina McCarthy, first of all, I want to say welcome, and first of all, I want to say thank you for being here. It is always something we aspire to make sure that we get as many people in the room to be part of the decisions that have to be made as possible. You're doing your part. It's up to us to do our part here. I want to thank Chief LaForme for his wonderful opening prayer and for always reminding us that we have a sacred charge to tend to the lakes. Thank you to Mike and his staff at Environment and Climate Change Canada for hosting. It's really difficult to pull off a conference of this magnitude, but I want to say Canada is doing it with grace. They are doing it with a sense of humor, even when the emails have been flying around at all hours of the night. And on that note, a forum like this doesn't just happen. It takes painstaking work over long hours and a long period of time. And we want to put up onto the screen here in just a moment the people who really deserve the pat on the back for pulling this together. You can also shake their hands. You can also give them a high five, one for each of the lakes, for doing what they have done to help bring all of us together. Please stand since we have your names here. If you were involved in the administration, the execution of today, we want to give you a round of applause. Carla, Chris, everybody. A lot of hard work. Okay, this is a big conference. I think at the last count we saw some 600 or so people register for it. So, because it's so big, we have thought that a good idea would be to give you a field guide to surviving the Great Lakes Public Forum. So we have a few pointers for you, a few tips that are part of this field guide. One of them is just to outline the goals of the conference as we see them anyway. What you're going to hear about, and this kicks off right after Mike and I are finished and we hear from the mayor and others, is to discuss the state of the Great Lakes, both past and present. But as you hear about the condition of the lakes and the ecosystem, think to yourself about how that translates into trajectories for understanding the future condition of the Great Lakes. You should also hear a little bit about that and think a little bit about that during the annex presentations. Next one is to discuss progress over the past 3 years. After all, big part of why we are here today is because the U.S. and Canada have released a progress report of the parties to mark what's happened over the past 3 years. This is really important for you to hear about. We want to know your impressions. And then to turn our attention also to discussing priorities over the next 3 years for science and action that will help guide our collective efforts. Again, past, present, future of the lakes. We want to hear your thoughts about how the two countries are doing and need to do going forward. To that end, the governments want to hear from you directly, but we also know that the International Joint Commission is going to want to hear your feedback as well. I'll mention that in a little bit more detail in a second. And then finally, this entire forum is a celebration of the Great Lakes. Every minute of every day is our opportunity to not just hear about what we've been doing and what we want to try to do going forward, but also to keep taking time to really celebrate and respect the lakes that we all love. Okay, here's survival guide tip number 2, field guide tip number 2. You really have to think of the conference as an organic whole, but just to make it all manageable, we have broken it into sessions and segments and things like that. All that is to say that don't think of the conference as being stovepiped. It's all one conference. One of the things that we've done is tried to build some redundancy into the system here, so if you find that you are missing a session, there are other sessions you can go to. If you have a question that you wanted to ask in one session, you couldn't go to it, there are opportunities to ask those questions at other pieces of the conference. Also, like I said, let us know your thoughts, let the IJC know your thoughts. We also have emails set up, special email inboxes, so that for those of you who are really, really shy and don't want to ask your question or tell us what's on your mind in person, you can do it from the safety of your own email. Okay, next, Waterkeeper. We have something really special today, which is to introduce you to the Lake Ontario Waterkeepers Watermark Project. Since 2015, the Watermark Project has been capturing true stories about the ways people interact with water. Please stop by the Watermarks booth located outside this room and down the corridor to your right and create your own personal watermark. And you're going to see, for example, here throughout the conference some watermarks that are flashed on the screen just to help emphasize how important these personal stories really are. I told you I wanted to come back to the International Joint Commission. Here you go. The International Joint Commission really plays an irreplaceable role in terms of advising the two governments and making sure that we are hearing what else needs to be done to help protect and restore the Great Lakes. You will have an opportunity to speak directly to the International Joint Commission tomorrow between 4:30 and 6 o'clock. The only thing that Mike and I ask you to do is to help the IJC by registering in advance if you can. If you have a comment that you'd like to make, please stop by the IJC's registration table where they'd like you to register. And their table is also, you can also find it outside the doors to the right along the corridor. And then finally, before we move to the next segment, no conference is complete without talking about Twitter. So please tweet away what you're sensing, saying, and seeing. Hashtag Great Lakes Forum is how we are engaging this medium to be able to tell the world and for you to tell the world about the lakes that you love. With that, we're going to pivot to the next item on the agenda, and that is for me to introduce His Worship, John Tory, Mayor of Toronto. Mayor Tory was born and raised in Toronto and has spent his career promoting and giving back to the city that he loves. After a successful career as a lawyer, political strategist, businessman, and politician, in October 2014, he was elected Mayor of Toronto. Mayor Tory was also made a member of the Order of Ontario in recognition for being a consummate champion for the Greater Toronto region. As a founding member and chair of Civic Action and chair and volunteer on countless fundraising campaigns. With that, please help me in welcoming Mayor Tory to the Great Lakes Public Forum.
Well, Your Honor, Chief, my city council colleague Jay Robinson, who will represent us so well here today, I'm really up here to give you a field guide tips number 4 and 5. Number 4, which Cam didn't share with you, we have a baseball playoff game going on here tonight. And so in welcoming all those from out of town, especially some of our American friends, I just wanted to give you a warning that any straying from loyalty to the Toronto Blue Jays, seen by anyone, even someone from Baltimore, would be seen as a grievous offense. And we have some cells under the old City Hall where we basically put people, and we treat them very nicely, but they're on bread and water for a couple of days while they have some remedial education. So you can avoid that by just kind of playing all that stuff down and even putting on a Blue Jay hat. Remedial tip from the Survival Guide number 5 is that we have changed the laws here, and I'm addressing this again, and I don't mean to seem inhospitable to our American visitors, but we've changed the laws here so that we now inspect luggage when people are leaving town. And of course we do that to see that you've done an adequate amount to support the local economy. And so it's easier if you just do some shopping before you leave town, because it's embarrassing if you're at the airport or at the border and you're sent back to do shopping. So I would appreciate it if you just take those 2 tips from the Survival Guide and take those into account, and things will go much more smoothly as a result. In all seriousness, we are honored to have you here and to have this meeting, and you understand the importance of it from the fact that they don't happen all that often. This is not something that happens every few months or even every year. And I want to thank our hosts, Environment and Climate Change Canada and the US EPA, for bringing this meeting here and for pulling it together. Because I think that I grew up at a time when, say in the 1970s, there were quite literally, as people in this room, many will recall. And I'm so happy, by the way, that you have here in our Lieutenant Governor someone who can not only get up and give one of those talks that would warmly welcome you and discuss some of the issues, but she is steeped in experience in these very issues that you're here talking about today. And what a privilege it is for us to have someone in her office that can do that and has that experience. But I remember in those days the Great Lakes were in crisis. And they were in crisis in a very serious way with respect to a lot of different things that people in this room will know better than I. And we took a number of steps, and those were commendable, and they were taken often in cooperation between the two countries and with including civic authorities and others. And I think it allowed us, as often is the case, certainly I'll speak for Canadians, that we do that kind of thing and then conclude the problem is solved and we can move on to something else. And while things are better, and while we continue, and certainly in the City of Toronto, to make a gigantic investment, and I'm delighted that my colleague Jay Robinson, is Jay in the room somewhere here? Where is she? There she is, right there. Jay Robinson is going to be here with you throughout these meetings, and she'll have a chance to talk with you and to listen about all that we're doing. And it involves, on our part, in just the City of Toronto, the continued investment of billions of dollars over the next number of years to deal with groundwater issues and to deal with waste treatment and a whole series of other things. I think that one of the bigger tasks that we have in front of us is to raise this issue back up on the sort of radar screen of individual citizens. Climate change is a hugely important issue and not unrelated to this, but I think that people have, in the course of becoming perhaps more concerned about climate change and some other related issues, have allowed the issue of water quality generally and Great Lakes water quality in particular to drop down on the radar screen, and sometimes I think people have even concluded that the issue was successfully dealt with some time ago and we don't really have to worry as much about it anymore. And I think meetings like this and the continued initiatives that we take and the investments we make here in the City of Toronto and of course in communities that you represent across the watershed of the lakes are important ways in which we can keep that keep it on the radar screen. In the end, it's going to take leaders of our Indigenous communities, it's going to take government, business leaders, and civil society, and that's what Civic Action was that I founded and chaired until I became elected mayor. And it really is one of the vehicles here where we get people engaged, individual citizens and parts of civil society that may not even have as their first concern the environment, but should recognize, as I'm sure they do, that these issues, whether it's climate change or water in particular, are issues that are of fundamental concern to our very well-being. And so I just want to wish you well in these discussions. I believe that water is going to rise back up, and it's not my place to make hierarchies of environmental issues up, but I think water will rise back up. Water generally, and the Great Lakes in particular, since we live on the Great Lakes, many of us, and that's why we're here, to be issues that are at the very, very top of that hierarchy of issues going forward. And I am hopeful that you will be able to address in all your different sessions that have to do today with groundwater and with waste management and invasive species, vessel discharges and so forth, some ways that we can move forward. And I noticed one session on the agenda which is on, I think, developing a lakes across the lakes approach, all the lakes working together and the two countries working together. And isn't that really what I think you're mostly here to do, which is to make sure that we can do this together? And here you have two of the greatest countries on earth that are people that we're wealthy, we're smart, and not to be arrogant, but we're wealthy and we're smart, and we understand the importance of these issues. And if we can't work together to get some things done, then nobody can. And so I really wish you well in your work. It's so important, and that's really just what I came here to say, that I'm committed to doing my part, and I think we all have to make sure we don't become at all complacent about what is something that's vital to human life and to our quality of life. Good luck with your meetings. Thanks very much.